It's been many years since I read Harry Potter, but one of the things that I remember from the Harry Potter series was J.K. Rowling's interesting take on the villain, and specifically the naming of said villain. That it was laid out very clearly in the first book, within the first few chapters even of the first book, that Voldemort, or Voldemort, apparently, because I guess you can retroactively change how people pronounce the name. But I still say Voldemort. Apparently, you couldn't say Voldemort. Even the name, had this evil, wicked connotation, and uttering the name itself would invite evil, wicked spirits and a dark feeling into the room, and that gets lost pretty quickly. Uh, for maybe the first book, maybe the first two books or something, it's like, oh, no, 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 we need to be saying he who must not be named. Um, but by like book 4 or 5 or something, it's Voldemort this and Voldemort that, which makes sense because it never ever really feels threatening to say the name Voldemort. It always just kind of seemed like, okay, that's the name. Not that big of a deal. And to be fair, Harry Potter is not the only story that ever did this, and that is certainly not at the top of my list for problems I have with the Harry Potter series. But like I said, other book series have kind of done the same type of thing, where you don't say this person's name, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because that is a theme, very small theme, but a theme here in the Wheel of Time series. The name of the Dark One, who is often referred to as the Dark One, when he is named, he is usually named Balsamon. However, his true name is Shaitan. And it's uttered very, very rarely in this story. In fact, I don't even know if I could point to a handful of times when the name Shaitan is referenced in this series. I'm actually several books into the series now, and recording these reviews in retrospect. But even in the course of like 5 books, I don't know if I could pick out 5 separate instances where the name Shaitan is mentioned. However, near the beginning of this book, The Great Hunt, Rand does utter the name Shaitan. And when he does, a whole mess of problems begin to unfold. But my point here is this: because there is a specific consequence that comes from uttering the name Shaitan, it feels evil, it feels wicked, it feels weighty. There's consequence, there's a price to be paid for uttering that evil, wicked name. And that makes a huge difference in conveying to the reader that this is a real threat. And it also lends a lot of credibility to building up the evilness and the wickedness and the darkness of your villain, which, again, unfortunately, is something that I certainly never felt in the Harry Potter books, as well as several other book series. But Harry Potter is kind of the one that comes to the top of my mind. So when we're back in Faldara, Rand begins to train with Lan. And I liked this so much because it's not like it's not like a training montage. It's not like some like 80s, Rocky training montage, and you got the music in the background, and he's punching sacks of meat or whatever. Um, but it's interesting because Rand is not made out to be a master swordsman at this point. In fact, he often admits his deficiencies, and we see those deficiencies in the story, which is great. It makes it feel like this is well paced. Yeah, no matter how much he is training with Lan, who admittedly is a sword master, no matter how much he's training with him at this period of time, it would be unbelievable to think that he has developed these great skills. Um, that he is still lacking quite a bit, and I thought that was very realistic and very believable. Again, just simply getting me to buy into the story more. But I mentioned the consequence from uttering the name Shaitan. When Rand does that, like I said, a whole mess of problems begins to unfold. Beginning with all of these dark friends descending on Fal Dara. Trollocs breach the keep, and Paden Fane escapes. And in his escape, he ends up wounding Egwene and, more importantly, making off with the Horn of Valir and the dagger from Shadar Logoth that Mat stole. I liked that so much because by bringing a few different items out of Fal Dara and running for the hills, we get multiple different threats happening here. Not only is the Horn of Valir gone, and the Horn of Valir is going to call forth all of these heroes from ages gone by, but those heroes will fight alongside whoever blows that horn. So Paden Fane has this horn. He could blow it at any moment and call down all these heroes, uh, and and they would owe their allegiance to Paden Fane, as he's the one who blew the horn. But not only does he steal the horn, but he also gets Mat's dagger. This dagger has become entwined in Mat's soul, and in order to properly separate Mat and essentially heal Mat, the dagger needs to be present with a collection of Aes Sedai to help free him. So anyways, without rambling on too much there's this great threat, and it's a multifaceted threat that comes, again, from Rand's immature and ill-advised, ill-informed decision to utter the name Shaitan. But speaking of the chase, Paden Fane makes out with the Horn of Valir and the dagger and heads for the hills with some dark friends, and Rand is going to go chase after him. And he's going to take with him Loyal and a tracker named Hurin, and they go and they track down Paden Fane, and that is essentially the Great Hunt. But during this chase, Rand, Hurin, and Loyal, along with a whole bunch of other warriors from Fal Dara, they all leave. But Hurin, Rand, and Loyal, in the middle of the night, somehow get transported to this other world, and I have no idea what is going on. Somehow they make it into this other world, and in this other world, it appears as though it's the same world, but as if Baltzaman has conquered the world or something. There's all these evil, wicked demon creatures around that they have to run from. But I don't know how they get there, and I don't really know what this world is. But in this world, they meet a woman named Selene. Selene. Oh, there are things to like, There are things to love, and there are things to absolutely hate about Celine. So, again, speaking of being confused by this world that they have been transported into, I'm confused about who Celine is. Why is she in this world, and why does she know so much? She helps Rand and Huron and Loyal get out of this world and helps lead them to safety, but she knows so much about these different like way stones, but they're not way gates because it's not going into the ways. We explored that in the Eye of the World, but they're like these portal stones, and they can kind of transport these people in and out of this world. How does she know all this? I don't know. It's intriguing though. I like that. Um, she also made me realize that every woman in this story that we have been introduced to so far is like drop dead gorgeous. And I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, sometimes we get like the impression that like, sure, Nineveh and Egwene, they're more of like a village beautiful. Like they can, they can kind of get like, uh, you know, dirty and gritty and work with their hands and they're hardworking people, right? They can get some calluses on their hands, but at the end of the day, they're just beautiful. And then we've got like Elaine, who's a princess, so she's also beautiful, but it's a different kind of beautiful. And even when we meet Min, who's like, I don't know if she's like a stable hand, but I think they meet her in some stables in book one. But at least I got the impression that she's beautiful, even though maybe she's the daughter of a horse master, or something like that. I don't know. Everyone is beautiful, and Celine is no different. The only difference here, I guess I should say, is it is made painfully clear by Robert Jordan that Celine is a 10. I mean, she's a straight dime. It's made unmistakably clear, and she uses that to her advantage. And it makes me feel like I don't know if Rand is just intrigued by this woman for some other reason. She seems like she's an important character, or is he just thinking with his crotch instead of his head? Uh, that's putting it bluntly. Anyways, either way, it kind of made me realize like every woman in this story that we've been introduced to so far is just like stunning. I don't know how I feel about that. Like that's not overly realistic, but I mean, I guess this is a fantasy story, so maybe it just comes with the territory. Now, one last thing that I like about this chase sequence is Rand and Loyal and Huron, they actually come back into the real world and they're ahead of where Paden Fane is somehow. Again, more confusing about this other world that they just visited. But because they're ahead of them, they can kind of cut them off the pass and they get the Horn of Valir back and the dagger and they make off towards Caerhane, which is a kind of a capital city nearby to where they are at this point. But in this sequence, there's just some great character development happening. Rand is in denial about being the Dragon Reborn, which is understandable. I don't think it's ever mentioned how old these kids are, but I picture them as like 17, 18, 19, something in that range, with Nynaeve being a little bit older, kind of mid-20s or something. But that kind of seems like something maybe a 17, 18, 19-year-old boy would do, right? Would deny that the fate of the world is resting on his shoulders and that he's this chosen one, this savior of the world to defeat the Dark One. But he refuses to accept that he's the Dragon Reborn, and therefore he refuses to channel. But he's put into these positions where he has to. For instance, the only way that he gets himself, Loyal, and Huron, along with Celine actually, out of this other world that they're in is to use his powers. So he does. He does use the one power. And I like that character development. Perrin actually goes through a very similar experience. Because Hurin is kind of their tracker, as soon as Hurin gets taken to this other world, Perrin's stuck with a whole bunch of these idiots who have no idea how to track Paden Fane, or at least don't know how to track him as well as Hurin did. And they're several days behind. So what are they going to do? Well, Perrin's in a similar spot. He's been denying that anything has changed in his life. He's been denying that his eyes are now this yellow color and that he has this improved sight and improved hearing and that he can communicate with wolves somehow and that he sees things and senses things in this wolfish way. He refuses to accept that anything has changed and that he has this ability. But then he's put into a position where if he wants to continue tracking Paden Fane, the only way he's going to do that is by reaching out and contacting those wolves and using that power, that special ability, and getting the wolves to track Paden Fane and using that communication. So he does. Again, I think it's this great this great character development device that Jordan uses to putting his characters in positions where they do not want to do something, and then changing the situation that they're in so that they have to do that one thing that they don't want to do. I think it's great character development. Once they reach Caerhane, things start to move pretty quickly. I liked Caerhane because it kind of reminded me of the Mistborn stories. There's a lot of like politics going on inside of this city. In fact, Tom Merrilin, who is not dead, duh, everyone knew that he was not dead. I've been through this type of story before. But we meet back up with Tom Merrilin in Caerhane, and he tells us about this, this great game that they play, and it's this political game within like the powerful houses within Caerhane. And it kind of reminded me of Mistborn and the great houses within Mistborn. And I thought that was like really clever. Also, one of the things that I liked a lot about being in Caerhane was we quickly become attached to a couple of characters there who just die off quick like that. I love that. I have not actually read the Game of Thrones series, but from what I understand, there is no hero protection. There's no character shield in the Game of Thrones world. You can become attached to characters and they'll be dead by the end of the chapter or something. And I like that. I think that far too often, maybe it's just maybe it's the fault of an author becoming too attached to these characters that they've written, but they don't want to hurt them too much. And I appreciate authors who are not afraid to hurt their characters. We get a little bit of that in Caerhane. Now on the other side of the world, in Tar Valon, Egwene, Nynaeve, Moraine, I know they meet up with Elaine and Min, but all the women head off to Tar Valon, which is the capital city of the Aes Sedai. It's where the White Tower is, where Egwene and Nynaeve are going to be trained as Aes Sedai. And there are some great plot developments that happen in Tar Valon. The first of which is Nynaeve becoming an accepted, and she goes through these portals. It's like part of some type of like a test or something, but she goes through these portals, and there are 3 of them, and in each one she gets glimpses of what her life could be. It's probably worth noting here that at the end of book 1, I think, Lan has apparently fallen in love with Nynaeve, which is great because for a minute I thought there was like a love story going on between Moraine and Lan, and I didn't like that at all. I don't know if I love Lan and Nynaeve, but it's better than Lan and Moraine, in my opinion. But she gets these little glimpses into what her life could be, and it is heartbreaking. Oh my gosh. it's beautiful though. It's, any time that an author can really stir your emotions, oh, it, I loved it. It hurt, and I mean, not that I'm like crying over these fictional characters. I would I would never do that. But anyways, there's a lot of emotion that's stirred up within these like one or two chapters. I won't go into the details of what she sees. Hopefully, I'll go back and reread those chapters, but I remember just how heart-wrenching it was. And it's essentially testing her to say, hey, here's what your life could have been, and I guess maybe you could just stay in this like, make-believe land, or you can come back to the White Tower and take your place as an Aes Sedai. But this is what you're giving up. It's like it's this ultimate test. Beautifully done, very well written. After this trial, this terrible, awful, heartbreaking trial, we get more interaction between Elaine and Egwene and Nynaeve and Min. All the girls have met, and they're all great buddies, and they all kind of talk about like the things that they love about the Aes Sedai and the things that they hate and that they can't stand. And they kind of all make like a little pact between one another that when they become full Aes Sedai, they're going to take the things that they love, all those good, wonderful things about being an Aes Sedai, but they'll shun the terrible, awful, evil practices, those morally reprehensible things that they can't stand about the Aes Sedai, and they kind of bond over that, and it's kind of cute and whatever. But they get contacted by Liandrin, who is a Red Aja Aes Sedai. So she hates all men, and the Reds have always kind of been like a little like, if there are like morally questionable things that Aes Sedai do, it's almost always Reds that do them. But Liandrin comes and she says, hey, I can't remember exactly why, but she says, we need to go help someone out at Toman Head, and we're gonna go, and Rand needs you. Maybe that's what it is. Either way, she convinces all of these girls to follow her, and the whole time I'm getting a very uneasy feeling. And they go to a way gate. They're gonna travel through the ways, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Liandrin is evil. For sure. Oh, for sure Liandrin is evil. And I know exactly what she's going to do. She's going to open up the way gates, and then she's going to get the girls inside the ways, and then she's going to close up the doors and lock them inside, and they're going to be screwed and dead for sure. But she doesn't. She takes them into the ways. And when she took them into the ways, I immediately thought, oh, you know what, maybe I was wrong. I mean, she's Red Aja, okay. Maybe she hates all men, or whatever it is, and maybe she's kind of, has a questionable moral character, maybe. But she's not evil. So they get out, and boom, betrayal. Oh, again, right? Anytime an author can, boil up that emotion inside of you, and this, it was anger and fury and regret and wishing that these girls could have seen what I was seeing. I knew something was up. Maybe I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew something was up. I thought that the betrayal was just beautiful, very well written, and again, emotionally stirring. Loved every second of that. Then these girls get captured by this group of people called the Senchan. I think that's how I've been saying it, Senchan. And they essentially enslave Aes Sedai. And Liandrin has betrayed these girls to the Senchan. Nynaeve actually escapes, and I believe that she escapes with Elaine, but Egwene gets captured by these Senchan, and she gets this silver collar put on her neck, and she's enslaved, where she will suffer immensely if she doesn't do exactly what her Suldam commands her to do. She is now what is called a damane, and which is essentially an enslaved Aes Sedai. And it hurts so much to see this poor, sweet, innocent Egwene treated this way. It was heartbreaking, and even thinking about it now, I'm surprised how emotionally moved I was to read about the pain that she was experiencing. This is so weird, right? Because it's a fictional character, but it was emotionally taxing and beautifully written. And ironically and cruelly, the only thing that I didn't like about it was that her enslavement didn't last long enough. So I mentioned earlier about character shield, right? Where authors are afraid to hurt their characters whatsoever. This felt like that a little bit. Egwene is saved, and Nynaeve comes and saves her, and it's probably like 50 or 70 or maybe 100 pages later that she's saved, but she's saved, and it kind of felt like it was written so well. This was a bad thing that was happening to Egwene. This was a really bad thing. And the weight of that event is kind of softened. It's kind of weakened when you get the cure just 50 pages later. We fixed the problem 50 pages later, and however bad this terrible, awful, horrible thing was, well, we've got the fix. So now it wasn't that bad. However, what was really unique to me was that when Nynaeve comes and saves Egwene, she breaks her free from this chain that's around her neck, and she and Egwene are now put in a position where they can enslave the enslavers. Oh, this for me, this took my reading to another level, to a deeper level. When I think of really well-written stories, well-written stories to me are a dime a dozen. Just a clever story that's well-written, great. You can find those just about anywhere, and they're great. They're wonderful stories. There's nothing wrong with them. There's definitely value to be had there. But then a story that is not only unique and cleverly written, but beautifully written, uniquely using unique turns of phrase and wordings, beautifully written, that kind of takes the depth and the value of the story to another level. And then when you or the author can evoke some really intense emotions like sadness and pain or passion or anger or revenge, that takes a story even to another level. But there's this deep, deep level where the story is forcing you to confront questions about humanity or life in general. These really intense moments that force you to ponder deep, deep questions. This was one of those moments for me in this story. I don't want to make this an apples to apples comparison because I fully recognize that this is a work of fiction. However, this to me was similar to a real world example. I don't think this ever happened necessarily, but if it had, it would be like the prisoners in Auschwitz somehow being in a situation where the roles with their Nazi captors were reversed, where these prisoners who can and did question how anyone could be so cruel, how anyone could do this to another human being and cause so much pain and suffering, then be put in a position where they could exact a just revenge on those who had done these evil, wicked things to them. Again, I don't want to make this an apples to apples comparison because it's not, but it does force you to ask questions that are deep and to ponder these types of things. What would you do? And Jordan does a very good job of writing this scenario in such a way that you are asking yourself that question. Is it just for Egwene to now return those unkindnesses, that cruelty that was done to her? Does it make her a better person if she doesn't do it? Does it make her more relatable if she does do it? Either way, it is beautifully written. So now we're in Toman Head. Rand and Loyal and Huron, and I know Matt gets out there too. I think Perrin's there. Fetch, everybody's out there. But there's a big battle that happens out there between the Senchan and their Damane, their enslaved Aes Sedai, versus real Aes Sedai, and some White Cloaks show up. Geez, there's a whole bunch of people just fighting all over the place. I loved seeing or reading that the Aes Sedai are like calling down lightning from the sky and raising these giant upheavals of earth, and it's beautiful. It's great writing and great visuals. But up in the sky, Rand ends up fighting Baltsaman, and everyone in Toman Head sees. And Rand gets marked with 2 herons on his palms, and he is marked as the Dragon Reborn, which is pretty cool, I thought. Matt is the one who ends up blowing the horn of Valir and calling down the heroes of the ages, and this was one of the coolest parts to me, I thought, because you get like Arthur Hawkwing, and you also get like Brigitte, and a few others are like named, but there's all these like crazy cool heroes, and Arthur Hawkwing in particular speaks to Rand and calls him by name, Lews Therin Telamon. One question answered. Because the whole time, when Rand is getting like his dreams infected by Baltsaman, Baltsaman is visiting him in his dreams, and in his dreams, oftentimes, Baltsaman calls him Lews Therin. And I was constantly questioning, like, okay, is this like a half-truth? Is this just an outright lie? I mean, this is like the father of lies, so maybe these are all just lies. I don't know. And in that moment when Arthur Hawkwing comes in and he speaks to him as a close friend and calls him by name, Lews Therin Telamon, Rand is this person, Lews Therin Telamon, who was the dragon, reincarnated. And he'll carry with him some of those memories and some of those thoughts of his previous life as Lews Therin Telamon. And it's going to be cool. But I remember kind of getting like, I don't remember getting shivers or chills or anything necessarily, but I remember just thinking it was so cool and getting that like, that confirmation that like, yep, okay, there's one less thing to be confused about, because there's a lot of things to be confused about still. Which brings me to my final thoughts. And the first final thought that I have is this: confusion. I'm still very confused about a lot of things in this story. I mentioned, I don't know like what that other world is. that Rand and Loyal and Huron got like sucked into, and I don't know how they got out of it. Um, I don't know what that is. You know, that's confusing to me. And I also don't know exactly what Moraine is doing. I mean, it's clear that Moraine is close to the Amerlin seat, who's like the head of the White Tower, the head of the Aes Sedai. They're up to something, but I don't know exactly what it is. And I don't know if it's like they really truly are genuinely trying to help Rand become the Dragon Reborn. They've been stilling or, you know, cutting off men from this magical power as they continue to find false dragons. But now that they know that Rand is really truly the Dragon Reborn, maybe they'll let him keep doing his thing, or maybe they'll help him. I'm still unsure. It's confusing, but intriguing. I should say that all of the things, or I should say most of the things that are confusing are intriguing. That's probably a better word to use for it, because if it was just confusing, I would probably get fed up with it and say, you know what, I'm a few thousand pages into the books now. If it's just confusing like this, I'm not into that. But it's intriguing, and it keeps me reading. And my last final thought is this. As I look back on my experience with the Wheel of Time, I am confident that in this series, this book is going to be the book that I say, that's where I got hooked on the Wheel of Time. I think I mentioned this in my review of The Eye of the World, book 1 of the Wheel of Time series. There are a lot of similarities to Lord of the Rings in that book, especially during the first half of that book. But by the end, it does become its own story. Book 2 is absolutely its own story. And not only is it its own story at this point, but in addition to its uniqueness, that uniqueness brings with it, as I mentioned before, those layers of depth in a story that I just crave. Those layers that evoke so much emotion. This book had me on a roller coaster. I was all over the place. There were moments where I was on the brink of tears, moments where I was furious, flipping through pages. I was so pissed off that people are getting betrayed, and I could see things that other people clearly couldn't see, the consequences. And then I got surprised. There was a lot of emotion. And in addition to all of that, as I mentioned before, this story is bringing into the forefront of my mind the opportunity to ponder some really important questions. Thought-provoking questions, deep questions, good questions. And I absolutely love that in a story. And it's one of the things that I love about fantasy stories in general. We all know they're fake. They're made up. These worlds don't exist. These characters don't exist. And yet, in this completely fictional world, we have the opportunity to ponder these questions and these paradoxes that are completely in our world. So, if it isn't completely obvious at this point, I thoroughly enjoyed The Great Hunt. And I'm very much so looking forward to The Dragon Reborn, book number 3 of The Wheel of Time.